Welcome to episode 43 of Real Health Radio. You can find the links talked about as part of this episode in the show notes at www.7, so SEVEN, health.com/43.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey guys, Chris Sandel here, and welcome to another installment of Real Health Radio. This week is another one of the shows where I'm interviewing a guest, and this week's guest is Sarah Vance. Sarah is a body image and disordered eating coach who helps others find peace and freedom around their body, food, and self-care. She helps women reconnect with their inner radiant self and start living the life they truly deserve. As a former bikini competitor and fitness model, she's familiar with the extremes and encourages others to find their grey. She believes in the power of our mindset and standing in the power of who we truly are. You can grab her free guide on 5 mind shifts to make you embrace your body and experience food freedom at www.sarahvance.com. I first became aware of Sarah's work through Summer Innanen. The two of them are quite good friends, and when I was talking to Summer about different guests that I wanted to have on the show, she suggested Sarah way back when, and I've started following her work. And Sarah's got a really interesting story about her experience of being a bikini competitor and what life was really like as part of that, and her struggles because of being that bikini competitor. So we chat a lot about that in detail, as well as her experience of coming out the other side and now starting to help other women who've been through a similar thing, or if not the competition side of things, just the self-loathing and the troubles around food and body image. And we cover a ton of ground in this episode. Before starting doing any episode with a guest, I'll spend a couple of hours going through different blog posts and interviews and writing up a ton of questions. And what will get asked as part of that will just depend on where the conversation goes. And sometimes I'll ask about half the questions, sometimes it's less, sometimes a little more. But with Sarah, I actually got through all the questions and then a lot more. And it was just such a great back and forth conversation, and we covered so many topics. So I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. Here is my interview with Sarah Vance. So, hey Sarah, welcome to Real Health Radio. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So look, for those who don't know who you are, why don't you start out by just telling a bit about your story and how you got into being a body image coach and a bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll try to keep my story relatively short. It always seems to lengthen a little bit, but I'll try to keep it short. So basically, per my education, I'm an ICU nurse. And so after I kind of graduated, I wanted to get on this idea of, being healthy. And on top of that, after you graduate, your body kind of goes through changes as you just naturally age. And I wasn't really very happy with my body. So I started to go down the path of just wanting to take better care of myself. Okay. And that path quickly kind of escalated to me eventually competing in bikini competitions. I went to see one of my friends compete in powerlifting. I saw a bikini competitor there, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I want to do. This is what's going to fix everything. So I went ahead and hired a coach, and that is when things kind of took a turn towards the worst, I guess is what you could say. So I competed for 2 years straight. I got the meticulous diet, regimented, training program, and the deeper and deeper that
when you're saying you're competing 2 years straight, I don't know that world very, very much. So how often would there be a contest?
So that's really dependent on the individual. You can compete. There's competitions all the time. And I was competing pretty actively. Within a year, I think the most I competed was 6 times. Okay. So that was a lot for me. It was a lot. At one point, I did 2 shows back to back, which was it was really, really hard because the whole process is hard. You're dieting, you're extremely restrictive, you're doing tense amounts of, exercise. So it's really not a great lifestyle.
Yeah.
But I competed quite a bit. So that just depends on the individual.
Okay.
So basically, the more you compete, the more that I competed, the further into it that you get, the leaner that you're expected to be, the tinier you're expected to be, the more shredded you're expected to be. And with that comes, a decrease in food, an increase, the typical idea that we have of this fitness, weight loss idea, whatever it may be. And I eventually got to the point where I actually had to change my job hours just to kind of accommodate being able to work out. I was doing 2 days, 2 a day. So working out in the morning for about 40 minutes and then working out in the evening as well, to the point of not hardly eating everything. And then my mentality around my body and food and working out was a complete wreck. I would go from severe restriction to binging. And then, of course, all those behaviors that come after that of the whole self-hate and shame and guilt, which would make me either not eat or severely restrict even more, or, really just exhaust myself to the point that I had no energy. It wasn't a really good way of taking care of myself.
Yeah.
And this continued. And, as a nurse, I knew in the back of my head that, this probably isn't okay. But when you're in that mentality and so disordered that you just that doesn't even matter. I was on the path of chasing perfection. And I was on the path of, just trying to get leaner and leaner and leaner, and nothing else mattered. I mean, I was very, very disordered. So I actually competed at a national show. And after that national show, I was laying on the beach and I was getting my photos taken by this really well-known photographer, because I had it all in my head, This body is going to make me blow up and be this amazing fitness model. And I sat there and I was like, is this it? This is all I have. I didn't have a period. My hair was falling out. I had to take a nap every single day because that's the only way I could really function in my life. I couldn't, go out with my significant other for a piece of pizza without having literally a mental breakdown at the restaurant, because I wanted it so bad, but I just couldn't do it. So it was very, very just unhappy, mentally unhealthy, emotionally unhealthy. Anxiety was through the roof around my body and around my food. That's all. It became my life. That's all that it was my body. And so I knew at that time that something probably needed to change. Once my period had been gone for about 4 months, I was like, okay, something has to change. But again, when you're that into it yourself and it has become your life, that's all it is. So Of course I went and got, my personal training certificate and set up my online business to start doing exactly what I was doing, handing out diets and helping people lose weight. And I went to California for a big, business event. And, I'd been dieting. I was severely restricted, still bouncing from, binging and restriction, still doing 2 a day. And, I go in and I'm like, I look amazing. And the photographer says, don't worry, we'll Photoshop out your stomach. And I just was blown away by it, because here I am trying to portray, what we think is health and fit, and it's not. It wasn't at all. And I was going to be selling a lie to people. What they were going to be seeing is not sustainable. It wasn't practical, and it was by no means healthy. So I had a few red flags that kind of popped up. And with my personal training, seeing women that would come into consultations, it was like looking at myself in a mirror, because I would hear the body hate, the shame, the guilt. I would actually hear it versus just hearing it in my own head. I started hearing it firsthand from women that I was training. And I knew that I had to change not only for myself, but now I wanted to change my business in helping people become, at peace with their body and around food. So that journey took about 2 years to completely get out of my disorder and get to where I am now. It's been about 3.5, 4 years. So now basically what I do is I help individuals have peace around their body and with food, and learn how to practice self-care in a more holistic way that encompasses compassion, self-love, and respect.
Okay, so look, there is loads of that I want to go back and unpack. So before you got into the bikini contest, I would like to hear just what was your eating and your exercise regime like growing up? How was your relationship with food in your younger years and your teenage years?
So that is such a very good question, because, when I grew up, I personally did not really think about my body or food. However, there was always this awareness in my house because both of my parents were bodybuilders. So that, I kind of was brought up into this mentality of, eating a certain way and watching, my family, my parents, when I was younger, measure out their food and going to the gym and on the quest to become leaner and things like that. So I grew up with that, but it never really I know it has, looking back, it definitely has some impact onto my own journey for sure. But when I was younger, I really didn't think about those things in an obsessive manner. I just ate whatever I wanted. And then when I got into college, I kind of dabbled into, I don't like myself. I hate my body. So I want to do something about it. And I actually got into weightlifting. I tried doing the whole being on the elliptical and I was like, this is boring. So I actually saw a picture of a female weightlifting and I was just amazed by it because at that time, 7 years ago, women weightlifting wasn't very common. It was still kind of a big deal. And I saw it and I thought the same thing. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I tried my hand at weightlifting and absolutely loved it. And my goal wasn't about my body. It was about just being stronger. I actually went into it when I saw that bikini competitor that I said in the very beginning with my story. It was because I went to see one of my friends power lift. Because that's what I wanted to do is I wanted to power lift. So it was strictly based on, what my body could do versus what it looked like. And at that time, I still didn't really I was a little bit conscious about my eating habits, but not in the sense of counting or calculating or following a regimented diet. So that's kind of how it was growing up. And then, everything my life kind of was in the crapper, to be honest with you. When I went and hired my diet coach, my family had moved away. So I was kind of mourning that loss. My friends have moved away. I was kind of mourning that situation. Okay. I was going through a really messed up relationship. So one of the ideas with body image is, okay, all this is a mess. Let me fix myself and maybe that'll fix everything.
Okay. And I mean, in terms of where you are now and getting out of the competing, have you had conversations with your parents about that and their thoughts on bodybuilding and their beliefs and how it's affected their body image? I'd be interested to find out that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I just this past year, I got very, very honest with my story. Okay. I did a major rebrand over this last year with my business. And one of my first blogs that I put out after I got my new website was, this is what my eating disorder looks like. And it's a picture from that photo shoot after nationals of me laying on the beach. It's a beautiful photo. And it got, people are look at it and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And basically the blog talks about, how disordered I was, binging, all this stuff, and all in the name of health and fitness. I hadn't really talked to my family about it until that blog kind of went out because it was something that is very difficult to talk about to somebody that you love. So I just recently, talked to my mother and my dad about it. And, they said, we had no idea. I'm so sorry that if we contributed to this. And, I truly believe my family and my parents were just doing the best that they could. They didn't have the intention of this happening to me, so I don't blame them. I forgive completely, and I've let that go because they didn't know this was going to happen. They just, I think that our family really tries to do the best that they can. At least mine does with raising me. Yeah. So I did have, a conversation with this. My mother has been very great. She is such a powerful, confident woman that when she kind of broke away from her own, bodybuilding, she's very much just authentically amazing. My dad still struggles every once in a while. And I have kind of tried to, reach out and say, hey, you know what? No, you can have the cookies or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's been a journey with that situation as well.
Okay. And I mean, from your impression, and I know you're not going to know hard facts on this, but of the people who are doing the bikini contests around you, how many of those people do you think were living in this really disordered world versus people who are keeping it all together and everything's fine?
Oh man, it's so, I don't like overgeneralizing, but I am going to say this, and this is probably going to upset the people that are in it, but I don't really care. I think that in general, it's a very disordered mindset when your body becomes your project and you are being judged on it. I just have a really hard time on understanding how, that's okay, how that kind of empowers us as individuals when we're being compared and judged on our body alone. And you have to be really focused on everything. I mean, it meticulously to the down when you step on stage. And then nobody, of course, kind of talks about the aftermath when, okay, granted, like if people do have, if for some reason they were able to have a good mindset, which I don't see, I know that I could never have a good mindset with it, given my history. Now, I can't say that nobody, that there are people out there, I'm sure, but in general, nobody talks about the aftermath of like, okay, now that you have this extreme level of leanness, now what? Like, what about going back to normal life? And that's the struggles that I see way more than not. But, the fitness industry is kind of like, it's a mess. I mean, it really is. Where almost like orthorexia has become very normalized almost. And binging now takes on this phrase of cheat meal. And it's, it's a normalized thing. So I think that disorder is very, very common in the body building industry, especially now that I've shared my story by the amount of people that have reached out saying, oh my gosh, me too. Thank you so much. So.
Yeah. And I mean, I've had Maddie Moon on the podcast before, and there's definite similarities in both of your stories. And there's been lots of different blog posts that I've read of other people who shared a similar thing.
Yes. Yeah. I was actually just on Maddie's podcast, and it was a great conversation because we do have very similar backgrounds. So I think that, the bodybuilding, I just don't see how it can not be disordered in some way, shape, or form. Okay.
And from chatting with clients and also from other podcast guests, like probably the most difficult part of the whole recovery process is weight gain. And this can be the actual weight gain and also the anticipation of the possible weight gain and the fear that it's never going to stop. I mean, how was this part of the recovery process for you? Like, how long did it take? And were there things that you did that could help in that process? And when I say help, I mean from a mental and emotional perspective as opposed to doing things physically to actually try and stem it.
So yeah, weight gain is one of the biggest things for me, and one of the biggest traps that I see with my clients as well is that fear of weight gain, whether it be real or the possibility, whatever it may be. That is so powerful in keeping people trapped in their disorder. And it was for me too. That's why, even though I said, okay, something needs to change, it took me about 6 months before I was like, okay. And even then you kind of go back and forth between, your diet mentality and freedom, and then diet mentality. You go back and forth because it's scary as hell, because we've been so conditioned in our culture to think that, fat is like a death sentence, which it isn't. And of course, that fat, has all these other labels, like you're not going to be worthy, you're not going to be loved, people are going to judge you, all this other crap. So basically, I don't have the answer to give in response of what I did, because it was one of those things that I just heavily relied on hope, faith, and just being completely done with what I was doing. I knew that I could no longer continue down this path. I really relied on my support system, and I just kept trying to be in my life, because that was one of the things that was so trapping. I was so in my own head. And oftentimes that's what happens, is we're so in our own head when we're disordered that we forget what it's like to go out and be in your life. So I really tried to make a point to just go and be in my life and do the things that really matter to me, like really ask myself, what is it that I value in this world? And let me try to do that. Because when I was in my, disordered situation, everything else stopped. Like my relationships got put on the back burner, my hobbies, my purpose, my passion, all that stuff stopped. And so I really tried to start adding things back into my life. And that isn't to say that weight gain wasn't difficult, because it was. It's just that I tried to really focus on all the other stuff that was now making me happier. And of course, getting rid of triggering things like, if the jeans didn't fit me, like getting rid of them, obviously getting rid of the scale, setting boundaries with talking to people in relation to diets and size and shape. And then also one of the biggest things that probably helped me was starting to add in body diversity into my life. So really start just seeing, different bodies, just going out and living your life and like being okay. So I knew like, okay, my life isn't going to end. So that's kind of how I dealt with it. It is very scary though. I completely empathize with my clients and understand where they're coming from when they're in that position. It's a very real feeling for sure.
Yeah. And look, what you said there, I totally agree with. And one of the real difficult things I find with lots of clients who've been really obsessed with food and with working out is that they have so little else going on in their life. Like everything else has just fallen away because this has been their all-consuming passion or been their like one and only hobby. And so getting people to like find a sense of identity outside of that stuff, but also struggling for them to work out, how do I spend my time? What do I want to do? What is my interest? Can be a difficult thing for people to start to rebuild, but it is really important. The more people can be enjoying all of those other aspects of life, so much of the other stuff can start to really drift into the background and be seen as less important.
Yeah, and I think it is really important to kind of step away and ask yourself, or try to envision, I have my clients kind of envision what would they like their life to look like or feel like rather, if they had to look back on it, and try to embody that and try to just really stay connected to that and then stay connected to why you're doing it. That was really important for me because, it is a struggle sometimes when you're in the beginning process of recovery and just honing in on your why and realizing that like what I was doing was not working. I wasn't happy. I wasn't confident. I didn't have freedom. I wasn't like living my life. So I really kept that in the forefront when I felt, triggered or whatever it may be, to sit down and be like, okay, let me regroup here. And then not act on those compulsions that kind of were still in my mind.
Yeah. And I'd be interested to find out, like, when you look back at old pictures of yourself, so that one that was taken on the beach, and I've seen a couple of shots of you back in the day, like, is there a sense of nostalgia at all? Is there ever a desire to get back there? And the reason I'm asking is I often find that clients who've been previously restricting and who had been previously thinner, that often they'll look back on photos with these real rose-tinted glasses and they remember how they looked, but they've transplanted this whole other experience to this photo. So they forget the pain, they forget the uneasiness, they forget all of the stuff they had to put up with each and every day to be able to look that way. And rather than being this amazing time in their life, it was actually a really horrible time in their life that they just misrepresented it. So I'd be interested to find from you, like, when you look back on those pictures, and maybe like when you look back on those pictures 6 months after you just started recovery versus now, like, how has that all changed?
Yeah, so I can tell you, let's start with now. I can tell you that right now, I did a interview with Superfit Hero, which is a body positive clothing line, where they actually did a video interview with me. And basically, I sent them a video of in the height of my disorder. And it was very, very triggering, not in the sense of me wanting to go back there, but because I was so sad for who I was. I had such an immense amount of compassion. And when I see those photos now, and even that video, I have no desire to go back there because of exactly what you said. I know what it takes. I know that I wasn't unhappy. I know how much I was really just suffering. And the life that I live right now is exactly where I want it to be, or exactly where it is right now. It's the life that, I always envisioned. I'm confident and I'm healthy and I'm happy and I have my relationships and I'm going out and living my life. Like, that's what's fulfilling to me. I'm living a fulfilled life. And I know that that's not what was happening back then. Yeah. So as of right now, absolutely not. Oh my gosh, no way. No way. Even if you could like wave a magic wand, I would say no, thanks. Just no. Now, 6 months into the journey, into the recovery process, when I initially saw those pictures, it was mixed emotions. When as being a personal trainer, one of the pictures that they put up was the one of me laying on the beach in the gym. And every day I walked in, as I was going through my own recovery, I would see this photo, and I kind of was angry. Like, I was mad. I feel like when you start kind of, at least for me and some of the people that I've worked with, when you start kind of breaking away through this, you kind of almost go through a grieving process where you're like in denial and then you get angry. So I do remember like just being very mad about like all this, like I had wasted so much time and energy and emotion on it for what? And so I didn't really, I know that in the very beginning, I'm sure I was like, I want to go back there because I was still in that mindset of like, your body is everything. But as I progressed in my own journey, it slowly became less and less. And I was like, I have no desire to go back there because I remembered how miserable I was, and how unhappy I was. I just didn't want to go back there.
And I think anger is an emotion I hear a lot from people, because as going through that process, there's a real like anger and resentment that they were sold this real lie that was meant to be this promised land that they worked so hard to get to, and it's like, for what? And just real anger at a society and a system that values that so much and tells people that they should be valuing that so much. And again, for what?
Right. Yep. Anger was a very, very real emotion in the beginning. And I feel like I want people to know that it's okay to go through that emotion. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay to feel that and work through it and allow it to come and, pass in and out of you, because it might be what needs to happen in order for you to kind of move forward.
And so I would also like you just to describe like what you were eating and your exercise routine was like at the time you were at your leanest. And the reason I want you to go through this is I often find that clients are rather delusional, and what they think that they need to do to actually get to a place is very different to what the reality is. So often they'll look at what they're doing and they think, oh, it's not fair. And I'm like, you're eating out all the time. You're going to the gym twice a week. To get to a level of leanness, like, it takes a huge amount of commitment. And I don't want you to go through this to give people ideas in terms of this is what people should do and as an endorsement, but more to give people a bit of a reality check of what actually has to be done to get to that level of leanness, so people don't think it's this like really easy thing to do and that everyone should be able to do it with very little effort.
Right. Yeah. So as far as my training, I was training towards the end, and for the greater part of the entire journey actually was 2 times a day. So once in the morning, I would go in and I would do extensive amounts of cardio. And then at the end of the day, I would go back for weightlifting. And it would be anywhere from 3 to 4 hours in the gym every single day. And then towards the end, it was 6 days a week previously. And then towards the end, it was almost every day that I was doing, at least on the 7th day, it was either doing weightlifting or cardio. So every day, 4 hours out of your life completely gone and dedicated to this, right? And then you add on, that you're severely restricted in your diet, so you have no energy and you have to take a nap. So go ahead and subtract another hour out of your life. And then, as far as my eating, it was very off of a piece of paper. I could probably name the food groups on my hand if I wanted to, on my hands, of what I was, quote unquote, you can't see me, but I'm putting quotations up, allowed to eat. And of course, on Sunday, I would go through this massive batch cooking, of very almost ritualistic situation where I would cook all this food, have my food scale, measure it out, pack it away in Tupperware, and that's all I could eat. No matter how hungry I was, no matter, how much I wanted, just something else besides what I had, that's what I would eat. And that's it. Like, you were not going out to eat. You're not going to be able, as a nurse, I wasn't going to eat any treats that patients' families brought into me. And you get this like really superiority complex with it all too, which is just a mess. But so that's kind of how the eating would be. And then of course, if you were quote unquote allowed a cheat meal, it would end up in a full binge, where I would almost black out and not remember, to the point of just being completely nauseous, sometimes to the point of vomiting, just complete loss of control, because at that point, food is controlling you. You have no control over yourself. And then the other thing is, the other thing that a lot of people don't know is you're taking handfuls of supplements, fat burners, vitamins up to 3 times a day. So yeah, it's not sustainable. It's a lot of stuff to get to that point.
Yeah. And I thank you for sharing that. But I have a lot of clients, and it's more the clients who are just doing things and wanting to be a little bit healthy more than going down the disordered eating route. But when we chat about it, they often feel that they're hard done by, and they look at people with bodies like you had when you're at your leanest, and they think that should be fairly achievable because of what they're doing. And I'm always like, you have no idea the amount of effort and the amount of dedication and the amount of things that people are having to give up to get there. And when people a lot of the time then hear that, they're like, I don't really want it. Or I want it, but I want it with a magic wand.
Right. Yeah. Well, and, that's kind of what we're sold, is it is a magic wand. That's why the health and fitness industry and, these 21 days or whatever do so well, is because it's a potion that we hope that will get us there, but it never does. Like I said, I changed my entire life around, including my work schedule, just to be able to do this. So it definitely is not worth it when you've taken that into account. And, if somebody is really looking for health, that's not going to be found in a certain size or a certain shape, and definitely not in a 6-pack or, muscle striations. They're 2 completely different opposing things.
Yeah. And so what's your definition now, and what are your thoughts around fitness? Because I imagine it's changed a lot from when you were doing before. And also, what do you do now in the gym? Have you got back into exercise after, I imagine you probably took some time off?
Yeah. So I took about 4 months off of pretty, intense exercise. Definitely 4 weeks completely off, where I just couldn't do it. I knew that I needed to really recover, because every time I'd step in the gym, I would be triggered to do my old ways. Yeah. So I had to take some time and really just allow myself to take a step back and say, okay, what is it that I value? What is it that I really want to achieve? Is it going to be something that's sustainable for me? And the most important question is this what I actually like doing? Because I sure as heck didn't like getting up, at the butt crack of dawn to do cardio. No thanks. I'd much rather sleep. So I had to really reevaluate my whole relationship. And of course, why was I doing it? So I had to take a look at all of those things and, took a step back. And then when I got into it, it really was a slow process. The biggest thing that I did is I stopped focusing on how my body would look, how the exercise would change my looks, and started focusing on what my body can do and how is it making me feel, and am I enjoying it? And then now, my definition of fitness, I don't really use the term fitness anymore, but it is, it's still part of me because of my story. I really talk about self-care, because when I really think of, taking care of oneself, or fitness even, it's about taking care of yourself. But so much of what we've been taught is that we focus just on the physical components, and we leave out the emotional, mental, and social components that do really embody this whole idea of health and fitness. Yeah. So I really take a step back and say self-care, where it does embody body, mind, and soul, being very compassionate and respectful, and coming from a place of love, where I want to move my body, not because I have to, but because I actually enjoy doing it. Or I'm not going to move my body because I want to respect it and give it the rest that it needs today. Now what I do is, it took me about, I would say, a year and a half. But now I actually got back into the reason why I actually enjoyed lifting or working out, which was weightlifting. So I actually do powerlifting now. So I do powerlifting about once a year. I compete. And other than that, I just go in and move my body and, just kind of train intuitively. So whenever my body says, okay, that's enough, I say, okay, we're done here. If it needs rest, then I rest. And then I practice my other self-cares, that are encompassing that emotional health, mental health, really taking care of myself from a more holistic point of view versus just beating myself to death in the gym.
Yeah. And look, I when I'm talking with clients, take a pretty broad approach like you've been describing when talking about fitness. I think fitness has become this very narrow definition of someone being able to do some very specific sport, whether it be able to lift a certain weight or swim a certain place or whatever. But really fitness should be about things that help you to be able to live your everyday life in a better, stronger way. Not something that helps you do a workout for 40 minutes that then destroys the rest of your day. And so getting people to understand fitness in that bigger, broader sense, is really important.
Yeah, I always say that I feel like it should add to your life. It should add value to your life and not take away from it.
Yeah, definitely. And unfortunately, that's just not the message that we're being sold these days.
No, we're definitely not. I just wrote a blog about that, actually, about how, this idea of healthy lifestyles, I'm quoting that again, because it's a phrase that's been thrown around of, it's a lifestyle. But when you really look at that lifestyle, it's not a lifestyle, it's a life. Like it's become your life. That's what's so common these days. And that's the dialogue that I would really like to see a shift among that, where it's no longer about shame, guilt, and body hate or punishment, where it is from respect, love, and compassion.
Yeah. And I guess, I in the same way I talk about health, like often people's striving for health can be for no other reason apart from health, and it becomes all consuming. And it's like, why are you being healthy? And they're like, I don't know, I'm just doing it to be healthy. As opposed to using health as this stepping stone to do all of the other important things in life. And fitness should be helping you to do that as well.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to ask the individuals, too, to kind of define health and fitness for yourself. Not what you think it should be, not what everyone's told you to be. Like, this is your life. Nobody lives your life. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors, how your life is set up. How do you define it for yourself, and how are you going to really allow it to become part of and add into your life versus take away? Yeah.
And so are you still working as a nurse?
I do. I am actually a part-time nurse. I work 2 days a week in the ICU. So, yes.
Okay. And how was that, like either working as a nurse or even the training to become a nurse, how has that helped you in the coaching and the stuff that you do now? Because I assume that there's got to be some skills that you've learned through that are very, very transferable.
Yeah. So in the beginning, when I first graduated, I was very, I was young. I was only like 19 or 20. I was very scared, going in the ICU. You see not the best situation sometimes. Yeah. So I was kind of a little scared. So that's kind of what started this whole healthy kick to begin with. But now after my journey and my recovery, I'm very, very thankful for being a nurse, because I have seen diverse bodies, and I've seen diverse bodies up close and personal, like right, everybody that you could imagine I have seen. And that can do wonders for your own mentality, because we're so focused on seeing this one type that we see. We get conditioned to that we forget about diversity. So I took a step back and was like, oh my gosh, like there's people that look like me. On top of that, it really helped me hone in on the sense that health and size are not directly interchangeable. Like I've seen people that have been, quote unquote, overweight by society standards and be healthy. And I've seen people that are thin and they're dying. So, that kind of helped me as well. On top of that, obviously being in the ICU and seeing some pretty tragic situations, it helps me be compassionate and start to be compassionate for myself and try to really learn how to embody that compassion. So it's done wonders for me. And on top of that, I actually just wrote about this today because it's actually Nurses Week. It was, it took me, it allowed me to take a step back and ask myself what's important. Because in my disorder, my body was like the end all be all. And when you see people dying, you kind of makes you change your perspective a little bit and ask yourself what's really important. How do I want to be remembered? When I look back on my life, how is it that I actually want to live it? And I could tell you from me, I didn't want to live it how I was living. So.
And I've seen different articles where people, like nurses, write about the things that people say on their deathbeds, or from other nurses talking about how just seeing people go through all of this suffering and how much it makes them appreciate life and appreciate the little things and change what they worry about on a day-to-day basis, and realizing how much of the stuff that is worried about is very frivolous, is never going to happen anyway, and just can help with that shift in perspective.
Absolutely. 100%. It was such a big eye opener for me because, when you have loved ones that are in the room, they're not talking about someone's size or shape or their weight or the cellulite or the rolls or anything. They're talking about who that individual is. And that was a big eye opener for me because that's what's really important. Our bodies is the least important thing about us when it comes down to it. We are individuals, and we all have unique, beautiful traits about us. And that's what's really important. How we choose to show up in this world and live our life.
Yeah, and I'd be also interested to just chat a little about like your food and your eating these days now that you've come out of being in a very restricted place. And something I often say to clients is that their thinking around food is often more important than what they actually eat, and that the dieting mentality is what is so problematic. I mean, is this something that you found with yourself and with working with clients?
Yes, it absolutely is. The mindset around our body and food really is the problem. It's not like the food itself, it's the thought process behind it. That's where we kind of making those mind shifts and breaking down those limiting false beliefs. That's why that work is so important, because a lot of it is just unnecessary fear. So my eating habits now, like I eat whatever I want, when I want, and how much I want. That's pretty much it. I don't, on all honesty, I don't think about it anymore. It's funny because, when you're disordered, that's all you think about. Like you're counting down the days or the time, or rather minutes, hours, whatever it may be, until your next meal, or you're thinking about what's in the meal, or thinking about what you're going to have next, or how you can undo that meal. Right. But now, like sometimes I like forget how to eat, like not forget how to eat, but forget to eat, and then I'm like, oh, I should probably eat right now because I'm starving, So it's funny because it's just the ultimate freedom, I guess, is that it's just not that big of a deal. It's not that important to me anymore. And food, it used to be very a narrow view of food where it was just calories in, calories out, and fuel. And now I've broadened that perspective. And this is what I coach as well, is that fuel is a lot more than just fuel. It is, connection, and it can be comfort, and it can be, all these different things, including fuel, because there's a lot of guilt associated with eating, like grandma's pie, because, it's not fuel. It was because of comfort. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. So.
Yeah, and food does serve many more purposes than just, as you say, the fuel that people get from it. And those things shouldn't be looked down upon. I think too often it's easy to think, well, did you really need to eat that food? Like, did it really serve a purpose from a health perspective? And as if that's the only reason that people should eat. And I think a lot of the issues we have around eating is because we've tried to break it down into this very simple thing where it is purely for health reasons, as opposed to the wider perspective around meals. And that doesn't mean that every meal has to be this big thing that you have with your family or anything. There is time for when food should be functional, but recognizing that it does have different roles to play, and all of those different roles are okay.
Yeah, including just pleasure. You know what I mean? Like it's okay. Like I have chocolate very frequently, even when I'm not hungry, or like whatever it may be, just because I like the taste, and allowing that to be okay as well.
Yeah, totally. And so with the clients that you work with, what are some of the biggest struggles that you see them dealing with?
Of course, one of the biggest struggles would be kind of what we talked about, would be the weight gain.
Okay.
The fear of the possibility of weight gain is one of the biggest ones. Letting go of control is very, very powerful, kind of allowing things to just be. And, letting go of the control when you really get underneath it and behind it is oftentimes about the opinions of others, what others will think of you. And then, of course, just the general fears of showing up as who they are. The feelings of not good enough, this idea around, that there's a bad body versus a good body. So really breaking down those barriers, like all those, limiting false beliefs that they have about body shape, shape, size, and about who they are. That's really big, because when it gets down to it, it's never really about food. Like, it might show up as food, but oftentimes it's something that's deeper behind it, at least in my experience. So really figuring that out and helping them guide through that is what's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I think getting people to understand that food is really a symptom, or is someone's tool for dealing with something much deeper, is a really important first step, because otherwise the focus too much just sticks on that food, and I've got to get my eating right, when actually that's not going to be resolved unless you're dealing with the thing that's going on that's much deeper than that.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, I mean, given your background with exercise, do you ever delve into giving people like exercise advice or writing programs or anything like that, or you've tried to just step totally away from the personal training side of things?
Yeah, I totally took a step back from that. You know what I mean? Because I don't ever want anyone to feel like there's a wrong or a right way to move their body, because there isn't. You really have to just kind of find what works for you. And that really is a personal choice. I come from a place, when I talk about, movement, really from a place of self-care and how it makes you feel, and doing it in an empowering way, and connecting, whether it be like you want to be grounded, or you want to feel powerful, or you want to feel free, whatever it may be, like talking about those things and allowing them to kind of, out of curiosity, find like, okay, because when you encompass this idea of self-love, right? Like, you're going to want to take care of yourself, probably. That's a side effect of self-love. So chances are, when they really embody unconditional self-love, they're going to want to move their body. They're going to want to take care of it. And so then talking to them about, be curious, like, try things. Like, what are some things that you liked when you were younger? It doesn't have to be this black and white of like going to the gym. I mean, it could be like throwing the Frisbee with a partner and running around in a field. You know what I mean? Like dancing. There's such a variety of ways to move your body. And I really have to ask them, like, what do you think you would enjoy? And then allowing them to build confidence to go out and try it. And then just intuitively learning, okay, I did like this, I didn't like this, and helping guide them about, around that situation. So I don't give out like very advice of like, this is what you should do, here's what you can do, in that sense. Now, if I'm in the gym myself, because of that, I do some powerlifting. If one of my, teammates is there, that's a whole different subject. You know what I mean? But with my clients with body image, I don't at all. Okay.
And is doing research into nutrition or exercise, like, is that something that interests you or fascinates you anymore? Or like, since you've got out of this mentality, you know what, you just want to walk away from so much of that stuff?
So as far as the nutrition aspect of it, I really have no desire for a few reasons. A, I in all honesty, I don't care. B, let's be really honest here. When you are disordered, you completely consume yourself. So I learned a lot because of my disorder. You know what I mean? Like you're constantly searching about, this, that, and the other. I feel like you have a ton of information. Most of the people that come to us for body image or disordered eating know what nutrient dense options are. Like they know, they're educated in that sense because they've researched it to death. Yes. So there's no reason for me to do that. Like, I don't care necessarily, because I really just rely on my own body's, intuition. And when I really allow that to happen, it doesn't guide me wrong. Like, I still eat in a very balanced way, if you will, where I'm still providing my body nourishment, but I'm also providing it pleasure as well. And then as far as like the whole working out thing, it's the same thing, like not really. The only time that I really, am interested in that is if I'm about to have a meet for powerlifting, and then I kind of look up a program, but that's about it. Other than that, I really just don't want to think about it. It's just not that important to me anymore. I just have other more important things in my life that I would like to spend my time and energy doing.
Yeah. And what is your powerlifting schedule like? So I know you said before you were training 2 times a day before with the bikini contest. So I imagine it's nothing like that. But yeah, how often are you having to spend time in the gym for that?
So I only really compete once a year. So for probably about maybe 3 months out of the whole year is when I'm actually like trying to be a little bit more proactive in how much I do. And even then, I'm only in the gym about 3 days a week, sometimes 4. So not that much, but I always honor my body. Even with something like that, I always train intuitively and always respect my body in a very compassionate way, because there's no reason like not to me. I really love and respect myself to that point, that level now. So other than that, I mean, I really just go when I feel like it. Outside of those three months, I just go when I feel like it. But that's the good thing about like, when you make an empowered choice versus feeling like you have to do something and you're doing something that you actually enjoy, you actually like do it on a more regular basis. And it's not like pulling teeth. You actually look forward to doing it because it is something that you enjoy and it makes you feel good.
Oh, totally. And it's amazing. I think I would say the same thing about food as well. Like I have clients who struggle for so long and they were on and off diets and who would eat terribly. And now I've said like, you can eat whatever you want and they eat better. And it's this real like irony of like they thought that they needed to be really like whipping themselves to keep up with that stuff. But when they used that method, it got worse results. And the same with exercise, getting someone to really enjoy the stuff that they do and not have this real regime of you have to go X amount of times every week. Normally means that people will start to do it more. And yes, we can focus on how to create habits and how things can actually happen, because I think there's a difference between I didn't exercise because I didn't want to, and I didn't exercise because I just didn't make the time. So looking at all of those different variables. But yeah, when people can start to be okay with whatever the outcome is, they start to show up a lot more.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, some of the foods that I fought the most when I was, in my disorder are the foods that I eat now, like without even thinking twice about it. And conversely, some of the foods that I would binge on, like I have no desire eating. So it's very interesting once you kind of really do break away from that diet mentality and you come from a really empowered decision and choice. I mean, it's very freeing to be able to make that decision versus, saying this is what I have to do and going by these guidelines and rules and restrictions versus just doing what you want to do because you're listening to your intuition and trying to respect and love your body.
Yeah. And I mean, in the same way as your comment about food there are lots of foods that clients come to me and they tell me they eat a lot of because they're healthy, and we discover that they're not healthy for them, just as they come and tell me that they try and not eat certain foods because they're unhealthy. And then when they start to eat it, they actually do really well on it. And it's like, if they listened more to their body as opposed to just the rules or someone's blog post or what such and such guru said, they would be in a much better place.
Yeah. I mean, your body is extremely intelligent. I don't think that we give it enough credit. And we within diet culture and the diet mentality, we really do obliterate every single signal possible, like hunger cues, satiety cues, cravings, which can be like your body telling you like, hey, maybe you do need to eat this, So, I mean, when you go by other people's guidelines or you're following a diet, it totally takes your own intuition out of it and also your own trust out of it.
Yeah. And so, look, I want to be respectful of your time and wrap this up. But before I do, where can people find out more information from you? And I'll put everything in the show notes. But if you can give people links for where they can find you on the web or on social media, and if you've got any upcoming events or things that you want to be promoting or talking about, like, feel free to do so.
Yeah, so you can find me on my website. It's sarahvance.com. That has all the links to my social media, but you can also find me on Instagram at Sarah Vance, which is my nickname. And then on my website, you can grab my free ebook, which is the 5 mind shifts to make in order to have peace around your body and food. And for recent things that are going to be coming out within the next few months or so, I'm actually going to be coming out with a Breaking Boundaries ebook in regards to, just finding peace around your body and around food, kind of the beginner steps of it.
Okay, perfect. And did I see that you're doing a retreat or something later in the year?
Yes, I'm doing a retreat with Summer Inanen, my amazing colleague in this industry. Me and her are doing a retreat. It's going to be called Reclaim Retreat, and we're going to be having that late January of next year. So keep an eye out for that from both of us. It's going to be great. It's a 3-day event held in San Diego where we just, empower women to just live their grown-ass women lives.
Cool. Well, look, I love Summer's work, and I follow her stuff really, really regularly. So I look forward to hearing more details about that and how it all goes, because I think it'll be amazing.
Yes, we're both extremely excited. It is going to be amazing. We're both pumped.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining me today. I'm really grateful for you being able to share your story, and I know that what you covered and your advice is going to be really helpful for people.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It means a lot. We had a great conversation, so thank you.